All right, what's going on, Woodshop? So back with another video today. Last video, I told you to be on the lookout for this one. It's one I'm pretty excited to bring you. I've been thinking about making it for a real long time. Really just wanting to make it, but had to find time. So today we're gonna compare our two dust collection setups. This is the one I would really say belongs, or you might find, in a beginner hobbyist woodshop. And then we move on to a more professional, higher end dust extraction system versus the shop vac into a Cyclone collection system. And I just wanted to give my perspective, having really started with this one. It's been my workhorse, and then moving on to the green tool lineup here, the Festool higher end brand. And I wanted to give my opinion based off some performance and some in-action shots that I'll show you here, but really just my opinion on, is it worth it? Is it worth the crazy price tag of the Festool plus the extractor versus just using a homemade kind of DIY dust collection system? So let's get right into it. All right, guys, so starting out with the shop vac system that we've been using for a real long time for our dust collection. So what it is, and you'll remember the video that I made when I really busted this thing out, and then when I adapted it to this more portable setup that we have here. All the links are on the screen now to those videos. But this is our rigid NXT 14-gallon, 6 horsepower shop vac connected to the kind of OG dust topper from Home Depot. This is the dust topper version 1. They have a version 2 out now that's clear, and it gives you the capability of grounding it connected to our 5-gallon Home Depot bucket. So really, if you remember this setup, this is what we started with. And since I've started with it, and that whole setup right there, let me just run you through the prices. The vacuum itself is about $125 at this time, plus the dust topper attachment, that's another $53. And then the bucket itself is $5. So all in all, you're looking at about $180 just for that setup there. And then I went ahead and did something which we should all do, but it took me forever to do. I upgraded. I didn't upgrade, I just modified, I guess that's the best word for it. This shop vacuum, words are hard at this time, by putting in a HEPA micron filter in it with the HEPA 16-gallon shop filter bag. So what I was finding before I did that, so the HEPA filter was an upgrade just to better filter out the air coming out of the shop vac once it had been recirculated. However, the standard shop vac filter would work just as well. What's important was the upgrade to using the filter bags, right? So on the inside of this vacuum is a filter bag, and that just collects all of the finer particles that don't drop into the bucket of the Cyclone Separator here. Before having the filter bag inside of it, all of those real fine particles were getting sucked up into the filter. I'm sure some were making it out the back end, recirculated into the shop, but it was really clogging up that filter, and every couple of hours I'd have to stop what I was doing, take this whole thing apart, take the filter out, and then, kind of take apart the ribs and things like that to get all of that dust out. Never really recovered, but it would always affect the CFM, which is the volume of air that the shop vac is able to pull in through the hose at a time. And that's how I'd really notice that it was getting clogged up. So speaking of CFM, again, this is a 14-gallon shop vac system with a 5-gallon separator attached to it. The CFM on it, again, which is just the amount of volume sucked through it, is at 165. So because of that 6 horsepower motor on this thing, that's one of the larger or the higher CFMs we'll find on the market for shop vacs, especially at this price point. So what that means is it's got great suction. Even after going through the Cyclone system here, and that's usually we'll see a drop in CFM once you go through a Cyclone system. We do on the rigid and we do on the Festool. That's okay. With that 165 CFM, you really don't notice the drop too much. So this has been quite the workhorse. I've been really happy with it. It's the beginner setup in my mind. You can get into it with the HEPA filtration and the shop filter bags, all for which that upgrade costs about $60 on itself. So we're looking at about $230, $240 for this whole setup all said and done. And that will contrast as we move over to our Festool here. Let's get into that one. All right, so now moving into really two different systems here, but all part of the same setup. We'll talk about the lower portion here, which is the actual Festool dust extractor. This one is the CT26 Echo. So this is actually the older model of this dust extractor now. Now they're selling the CT26 EI, I believe, and I'll get into those differences here in just a minute. But to start off, this is a Festool dust extractor, and it's a 26 liter or about 7 gallon dust extractor. And this one has a HEPA filter that comes standard installed on it right out of the box. So you won't have to spend a little bit of extra money on the HEPA filter like you do with the rigid. This one has a smaller overall capacity at that 7 gallons. It's also got a lower CFM at 138. And so it's got a little bit less suction. However, I would say that this dust extractor is more efficient. It is a better system. And so you don't notice that delta of about 40 CFM in there. So this is the CT26E, and really the only difference between the E and the EI is the EI has touch controls as opposed to these analog switches that the E has, and it also has Bluetooth capabilities built in, whereas with the E you have to get an additional component to upgrade this to be Bluetooth capable, but you can if you'd like. So some of the features of this vacuum that you don't have with the standard shop vacuum is this manual and this auto function here. So when it's manual, just like any other vacuum, as soon as you turn it on, which once it's plugged in and you switch to manual, it kicks it on, you've got vacuum suction power. When you come to auto, you can leave it plugged in 24/7 and it's not going to turn on until the tool that you have plugged into this external port here is drawing current through the vacuum, and that tells the vacuum to switch on because the tool that it's connected to is now being used. You can also adjust the suction rate here and with this analog potentiometer, the switch here. Most everybody I've seen just leaves it at max, and so do I. As for getting to the actual components on the inside here, it's got a filter bag just like the shop vacuum does, as well as the housing component for the actual HEPA filter. What this has that the other doesn't is a hose storage system right here underneath the extractor. So if I didn't have the extractor on, you can bundle up your hose and put it right in there. On the back, it's also got, mine's broken, I'm missing a piece here. That's what happens when you buy used tools, but it's also got a little bit of cord storage there, making the system really very compact. All right, so this Festool CT26E and really the EI as well, they retail for about $800. So that is a stark comparison to the shop vacuum at 125. And we'll get really into the differences between a dust extractor and a shop vacuum and why it may be worth the extra, whatever that is, $500+. But before we do that, we're going to talk about Festool's Cyclone Separator here as it compares to the dust topper. So this is Festool's Cyclone system that you see I have attached here. What's really nice is that Festool has really incorporated and really thoughtfully designed their product line to work together seamlessly. So where I had to modify with the PVC piping and the piece of plywood cut out to hold my dust topper bucket on top of the rigid vacuum, Festool went ahead and integrated this Cyclone into a sustainer which connects directly to the top of the extractor itself. And so that's just thoughtful design, makes this overall more compact and more portable right out of the box. As for how the Cyclone works, it works just the same as the dust topper. You've got a cyclone, right, of air that's moving through from the extractor through the Cyclone and then, to the tool, and it draws in all of the sawdust into the extractor. The heavier, thicker dust particles and debris fall into the actual catch basin, the 5-gallon bucket for the dust hopper, or this one here, and then the smaller, finer particles make it into the vacuum or the extractor itself. So fall into the actual vacuum and filtration bag. Now the the Cyclone on the Festool, this comes in at a whopping $449. So you're talking almost $400 more than the dust hopper for essentially the same function. And that really sums up the specs, if you will, of both the Festool Extractor, the Festool Cyclone, the dust hopper Cyclone, and the rigid system. The only thing I really didn't talk about is the hose components. Now, they're really all the same, 2.25, I believe, diameter hose fittings. The Festool actually steps theirs down just a little bit more, whereas the rigid keeps it at 2.5 or 2.25, whatever it is. I'll put it on the screen for what it actually is right now. But hoses can be interchangeable for both. We'll come back to that later though, because it is important. And finally, the last thing I haven't mentioned is talk about mobility of these systems. And so the Festool, if you'll notice here, has these really large kind of locked in one plane of movement casters here, and then 360 omnidirectional, about 4-inch probably, or maybe 3-inch in diameter casters here that are plastic. It makes for good mobility. Everything's nice and smooth. The bigger casters in the back make him coming over extension cords, things that you may have around the shop, cracks in the concrete, a lot easier. However, I will say that it is not quite as efficient as the omnidirectional rigid system that we see, having all 4 wheels on omnidirectional casters. Now, these are much smaller casters, and so they are much more likely to get caught on extension cords and things like that throughout the shop. But it is easier to pull around with you as you're moving around the shop. Okay, now before we get into the actual testing of these two systems against each other, both the vacuum versus the extractor and the dust hopper versus the Festool Cyclone, I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between an extractor and a shop vac. Questions that I had myself before jumping into the Festool line here of dust extractors in general, when the shop vac I felt was working just fine for me. So really, just the overall wave tops is the shop vacuum is better for general purpose, picking up loose, larger debris, maybe water, things like that. So they're really good on job sites, and they have that CFM, so they have a whole lot of suction. Versus an extractor is really made for woodworking specifically. It often integrates HEPA filters for fine dust filtration versus a shop vacuum. You have to upgrade that capability if it's even adaptable to it. And they're usually quieter, things like that. Now, here's the real kicker though, because I know you're saying, dude, there's no way that's worth the $500 difference in prices. So I mentioned CFM a lot earlier, noting the 165 CFM, that real strong initial suction from the shop vac, and then the lower, I think 138 or something like that CFM of the dust extractor. But that's not the only metric that matters when we're considering how it's going to impact our woodworking. So another metric that we really need to pay attention to, what you really need to pay attention to, whether it's a Festool dust extractor, a Bosch dust extractor, a DeWalt, whatever, is the static water lift. Now that's a pretty specific number to extractors, but it does apply to shop vacuums too. You just have to do a little bit more digging than what the actual product page specifications may give you. You might actually have to get into the manual, whereas the dust extractors will usually list those in the product specifics because it matters. So static water lift, what that's telling you is essentially how constant the suction will be and how well the suction will perform through smaller ports than just the 2.25 inch. Think a table saw dust port, maybe your orbital sander dust port, which is like only 1 inch, maybe even 3/4 of an inch, right? As we decrease the diameter that the suction, the air, can move through. And so for a dust extractor, it's much higher. For this Festool specifically, it's 96, whereas for the shop vac from the rigid line here, we're at 45. So what that tells me as a woodworker is that the dust extractor is providing higher suction through smaller ports at a more consistent rate, where we may not see that consistency or that performance from a shop vac. So even though it has the higher CFM, higher suction, it may not work as well with woodworking tools, and that's why dust extractors are really preferable for wood shops and woodworking. But okay, that's enough details on these two and numbers and a lot of talking right at the camera. You guys want to see performance, and so do I. Let's get into it. Okay, so here's the test. I've got my pile of sawdust. This is the remnants from our cedar planters and one cutting board. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna run both systems through this pile of debris, this sawdust, and what we're gonna find, or what we're gonna see, is how much ends up in the Cyclone catch basin. So we'll see which Cyclone is essentially better, and then we'll see how much debris is caught up in the filter bag itself. And so I'll bring it closer here just to show you that I'm starting with everything as empty as I can get it for a completely fair test. All right, so looking at the dust topper, our catch basin is completely empty. I went and just emptied this filter bag, and so it is completely empty. You can see that. And then as you'll see, the filter itself is clean, brand new, really looking. That's our pile of dirt there, sawdust. And then we've got our bag inside of our catch basin for the Festool Cyclone, but you'll see that's completely empty as well. And then the bag itself is very empty for the Festool Extractor. The filter is really hard to get to, so I'm not gonna pull it off, but it is clean as well. All right, and just for ease of testing, I went ahead and left it unassembled here, but you see I've got my shop vac running into my Cyclone, and then the actual hose itself with the attachment to pick up all this sawdust running into the Cyclone. So let's go ahead and start with the shop vac. All right, so I've gone ahead and gotten everything disconnected here. We're gonna start with the shop bag, the filter bag itself, since that should be the least amount of debris coming out. Oh yeah, real fine stuff, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like here in just a minute. There's really like nothing. Oh, there's a little bit, there we go. There it is. That's about all I can get out of this. Can reattach. As you can see, the filter is pretty much unmarred. Let me show you this real fine powder. Aside from this little kind of bunch of debris, the powder that came out is just a real fine sawdust. Okay, now let's get what came out of the Cyclone. Okay, so really kind of as expected, right? This performed very well. You saw it move really quickly through picking up that large pile of sawdust, and then the catch basin of the Cyclone caught really, I would say, 99% of the debris and sawdust, the larger shavings into the catch basin, even a lot of fine powder that's on the back end of this bunch here. Whereas the filter bag caught that last 1% of really fine stuff, and pretty much nothing made it to the filter itself. Let's go ahead and test the Festool. right, so same deal. We'll go ahead and we'll start with the Festool bag. A lot more right off the bat, I'll tell you that much. Okay, we'll get the bag itself. I think I've got a tear in my bag, so had a little bit more come through into the actual catch basin. All right, woodworkers, so that was the Festool CT26E's performance. I would say, honestly, almost maybe 30-70, 40-60, 40% of the larger debris, fine debris into the filtration bag itself, and then 60% into the actual catch basin. Still none in the filter though, I know that's for sure. And you saw me stop twice to unclog the ports of the Festool, because just pulling in kind of that larger debris, those shavings, the chunks of wood that are in here, definitely clog that up. Whereas the dust topper and rigid system have much larger diameter ports all the way through, really 2 1/4 from the into the hose, into the dust topper, into the shop vac. Whereas this reduces to honestly like a 1/2 inch port up here to get through the Cyclone. And so anything more than that really gets clogged up pretty easily. All right, guys, the very last thing I want to cover with you guys quickly about the differences between these two systems are the standard hoses that they ship with. So for the rigid shop vac, we've got this kind of rubberized hard plastic 2 1/4 inch diameter hose that you see with most standard shop vacs. My issue with that is that it doesn't really work well with a whole lot of systems like your small woodworking power tools. They usually have anywhere from a 1/2 inch up to maybe a 1.5 inch, 1 1/4 inch dust port on them. And so I had to get all these crazy adapters. Cost me like $30-40 of special rubberized PVC adapters to get them to connect to smaller dust ports. My biggest issue with the Festool is actually its hose. So you see a lot of woodworkers rave about the hose that the Festool comes with. It's this nice anti-static, braided, corded, they say it's incapable of tangling itself hose. And it is a really nice hose. It feels great. It doesn't tangle, and it is anti-static. However, this is the port that is on the Festool hose. It's like not even, it's like a 1/2 inch. Okay, maybe it's an inch. It's about an inch. And that works with like 0 woodworking tools. It's the same diameter as my DeWalt orbital sander dust port, so it doesn't connect. It's too small for my table saw and my miter saw, and I can't find any adapters that fit the thing. So that's kind of my qualm with it. If I had Festool tools, which are built to work with this system, I'd have no issues. But there's like literally a spider's nest web thing in the hose itself right now because it's been stored and I've never used it. So that's my qualm with it. Here's my compromise. Be right back. Okay, this is not the first time that I've plugged this system on this channel. So this is a CEN-TEC dust collection hose system. It's super easy to find. They're available all over the place. Amazon's where I got it. Affiliate links to all these products, but especially this will be in the description. And you've got this nice kind of same plastic ABS 10-foot hose. You can get it in a like 20-foot hose reel, maybe even 16-foot. And it's got all these adapters that come with it, right? So it's got this first adapter that lets you mount it to pretty much any system. It mounts to my rigid shop vac, it mounts to the Festool, and then it's got this other end here, which you can see has this kind of blue, allows you to pinch it, quick disconnect, quick connect system. So the hose itself comes with like 5 or 6 different rubberized adapters of different diameters. So I can put one on my DeWalt table saw, my Bosch miter saw, my DeWalt orbital sander. I can put them everywhere and I leave them there. And then when I want to use the hose, I just quick disconnect or quick connect to it. It's been great. It's one of the best upgrades I've made for my shop, and it's real cheap. High quality. I haven't had to replace any of the adapters yet, but It's not overly expensive and it works with both systems, so I can't recommend it enough, especially if you're like me, a jack of all brands is what I call myself. I've got one of everything, Rigid, DeWalt, Bosch, so it works really well. Okay, and finally guys, what you're really all here for is what's my opinion between the $1,250 Festool plus Cyclone extractor system and the $230 HEPA modified rigid shop vac with the dust topper. All day, every day, any day, I'm going with the rigid shop vac, especially for my setup being the small-time hobbyist amateur woodworker with various brands of tools throughout the shop. You saw how well it did perform, and I do want to defend the Festool for just a second here. You saw it get clogged twice, and let me just, okay, it never has to pull in that volume of debris at one time when it's being used with tools, right? So when it's connected to a miter saw, a table saw, an orbital sander, it's pulling through small amounts of fine debris, fine dust at a time, and I've never ever had it clog while using it on a tool. Visa, the shop vac, it's what it's built for. It's picking up the large piles of loose debris on a job site. It's got the 2¼ inch diameter hose all throughout the entire system, so nothing will get clogged in there. Whereas the dust extractor is meant for fine particles, woodworking, dust collection, right? So I'll defend it there. Now, what I won't defend, and really what came down to it performance-wise for me, was the 99:1 ratio of what ended up in this catch basin versus the filter bag, and then you had the like 40% in the filtration bag, 60% in the catch basin of the debris in the extractor. That's poor performance in my mind. I don't put it on the extractor. Really, in the design of the Cyclone for the Festool, I don't find that it performs very well. I find that the dust topper is way better at acting as a cyclone. It's much easier to empty a dust topper or a cyclone in its catch basin than it is to empty or even to purchase and get a new filter bag. So it'll greatly extend the life of your filter bags and your filter, in my opinion, using a different type of cyclone. And you can use a different type of cyclone with this Festool. I just have the Festool Cyclone attached because I bought them together. So that's really my opinion. The other one is the price point. I mean, it's a crazy price point of almost $1,000, more than $1,000 between these two systems. Now, I bought this second or third hand even, and I got a killer deal that I felt like I couldn't pass up. And in the end, I will end up keeping my Festool and selling my dust topper and shop vac system here. And that's because where my shop is going, the trajectory is I will end up with more Festool tools in the future, an orbital sander, things like that, that will work great with a Festool dust extractor. However, I do acknowledge that this is better for more amateur hobbyist wood shops, and so that is the one that's getting my overall recommendation. And I just, I hope you guys really took something from this video, really learned either the difference between a shop vac and a cyclone setup versus an extractor and a cyclone setup, and what the difference between an extractor and a cyclone is, what you're looking for, whether it's CFM or static water lift metrics, why that's important, something that I didn't know. And then finally, just my opinion between the two systems. I just don't think it was talked about on the internet enough. When I was looking about what would be better for a small amateur hobbyist shop, everybody raves over the Festools, and while it is a great system with great build quality and design, my personal experience and recommendation is that the rigid shop vac setup, any shop vac setup with any cyclone, whether it's a Dust Deputy, a Dust Topper, an Oneida, will work better for those setups. And that's just my opinion. So as always, guys, thanks for watching. This has been 5 o'clock Woodshop. Please like, subscribe, and share that content. The support over the last month has been incredible. The channel's grown a whole lot. Thanks for watching, everybody. Really appreciate it. Check back next time for a great video. We're going to start building some in-grain cutting boards. It's going to be sick.